So Rich was talking about writing a press release. This idea, in the old days, when we were talking about launching a product, the question we were asking ourselves is that, what headline do we want? So we'd say, imagine Wall Street Journal or Computer World is covering our launch. What headline do we want them to come up with? Right? And how do we communicate so they actually write the headline that we like them to do? Do we want to say, this is when I was at Sun. So do we want to say, the company redefined something, or do we want to say that, they have a Me Too product competing with somebody else, right? So that has now led to write the press release first. In fact, more and more people don't even build a product before they write the press release. Amazon is really big on this, and I think the idea is now going everywhere. So before you even think about building a product, write the press release. And a press release is a pyramid. You can stop reading at any time and you kind of know something. It's the opposite of reverse pyramid, where you derive something and you get to the punchline. The punchline is at the top of the pyramid. What are you building? What is your announcement? So that's great advice. And that has allowed me to get set up here. All right, so we're now going to a little bit more towards the meat and potatoes of marketing. Go to market, GTM. First time I hear it said GTM. What do you mean go to market? I'm not going to market. But it's the word, go to market. Vision and value proposition. And I'll tee it up for Kim McMahon, who comes after me, to talk about engagement. So we heard about the pitches that are bad. This is hopefully some tools to make a pitch that is actually good. So what is vision? A vision must have two qualities. It must be simultaneously inspiring and inevitable. If it's inspiring but not inevitable, it's a pie in the sky. If it's inevitable but not aspiring, then everybody is going to do it. So two qualities that a vision must have. Value proposition. A value proposition is when the customer's genuine needs meet a product's real capabilities. It's not about fooling people. It's about identifying accurately the need and the capability. If somebody breaks their leg, crutches. Do they need crutches? They do. Very easy to connect. Genuine needs, real capabilities. So the whole point of marketing is to honestly understand those and identify those. When you use marketing to mislead people, it's a bad idea. So bad marketing gives a bad rep to marketing as a whole. Good marketing is when this happens, and you don't need a marketing department to make this happen. Good marketing happens without marketing departments all the time. Go to market, GTM. It has three components to it from my standpoint. The first one is the customer journey. What does a customer go through from the time when they have no idea you even exist until they are a satisfied, loyal customer? What is that journey? Now, that journey used to be a very linear model. It was awareness, positive disposition, consideration, purchase, and then sort of post-purchase, etc. So the funnel continues to be important because it linearizes things. And at any given time, regardless of where you are in this zigzaggy journey, you do have a likelihood of whether or not you're going to buy something. And this is becoming automated in a big way, which also Kim will talk about. This slide is from Forrester Research. This is, they actually went through and defined the customer journey in its own, not very linear model. And then you have the customer journey, you have the funnel, now you have a marketing mix that can be applied to each stage of the funnel, right? If nobody knows about you, you're just kind of blasting. A press release is a good way to cast a really big net and see who bites, see who cares about it. Search engine optimization is in that category. You're just putting keywords and people identify themselves. Oh, I'm interested in this keyword, right? It doesn't really qualify, So I'm a consultant, an industry analyst type. I'm interested in a lot of technologies. The likelihood of me buying is 0. So when I get a call from sales guys, I tell them up front, I say, I do what you do, so don't forecast me. I'm not about to buy anything. Now I can recommend you, I can do this, that, and the other. I like to learn more, so there's an indirect benefit to you. So it's hard to tell. Even when you do search engine marketing, which is sort of, I've got content, who do I distribute it to? You may need to do additional qualification to sort of understand who you're talking to. And then we go to demand generation. The funnel is traditionally called a Martini glass because as awareness, you get a lot of people who are aware. How many of them are actually going to be interested? A small fraction. How many of them are actually going to have budget to actually do something? Small fraction. How many of them are going to actually take action now? Even a small fraction. And how many of them are actually going to buy? So it ends up looking like a Martini glass. The assignment for marketing is to turn the Martini glass into a beer mug. So it all goes right through. It doesn't shrink as you go down. The shrink as you go down is called the conversion cycle. If I have 100 prospects and only 10 of them buy, I have a 10x conversion cycle, 1/10. And conversion cycle, I haven't seen anybody that tracks it in a real way, but that's the real metric if you ever want to do that. Now, in order to do all of that, what are the top requirements? You must understand the customer, you must understand the product, and you must understand the competition. This is the fundamental requirement of good marketing. It is very difficult, so no wonder good marketing is rare, because those who really understand the customer end up not understanding the product. Those who really understand the product can't even explain it because they understand it too well, they're too close to the canvas, right? And competition, you really gotta, people who buy your competition's product, they like it. Why do they buy it? You need to understand that, right? We talked earlier about these things. The customers need to kind of get it and buy it. They almost always get it. If you walk away from a customer saying they just don't get what I'm doing, they do. They're just not buying it. They know what you're doing. And if you haven't been able to explain it to them in a way that is persuasive, then it's your fault. It's not their fault. So how do you go about this? You go about this, the typical model, and I'll start from the right-hand side of this, is that you gather data, you analyze, you synthesize, and then you do engagement. Analysis and synthesis are two different parts of the brain. There are very few people who are simultaneously good at analysis and good at synthesis. Synthesis is the creative work of picking pieces from the floor and creating something that is really nice, really probing, really sharp. Analysis is to just cast a lot of things on the floor. Now, data needs to be validated. All of those things. So how do we go through it? You start with segmentation and constituents, so you can kind of know where to get the data. You do inbound gathering and you validate the data. You do some feasibility and prioritization, like Subbu was saying, you have to make a choice. Which one do I do? What is the portfolio of things that I do and how do I do it? You do competitive positioning. You come up with value proposition and messaging. And as you go from top to bottom, you start doing the synthesis. The competitive positioning, by the time you get to value proposition and messaging, now you're doing the real synthesis work. And then once you have the messages, you create stories, etc. So as a result of that, we have a framework that all marketing ends up following, whether or not they do it consciously or subconsciously, or they have a different model that essentially does the same thing. You go from data, analysis, synthesis, engagement. The first thing is the trends and the strategy. What are the mega trends in the market? IoT, big data, cognitive computing, whatever, right? So that becomes sort of the mega trend that you want to latch onto. And that leads to your corporate strategy. You say, our corporate strategy is to build a piece of software, which means you're not building hardware. You're not building, food. You're not, you narrow down what it is that you're actually doing. The next one is to understand the audience and the sales cycle. It is very critical to understand who you're talking to. Are you talking to a techie? Are you talking to a business guy? Are you talking to, someone in the US? Are you talking to somebody in, so all of those kind of inform how you want to communicate with these guys. Again, the point of this is clear communication. The point of this is to make it easy for them to understand what it is you're doing. And then the sales cycle. What journey do they go through? Whose money do we want? What do they go through before they're willing to part with it? What do they expect? What is their experience? What is their buying behavior? Do they like to do it this way? Do they like to be online? Do they like to actually physically see it? What are those attributes? Then you go to competition, you do the competitive positioning, you do a value driver matrix, and I'll get to that in the next couple of slides. And then you come up with the value proposition messaging. So I'm going to stop right around here in the next few slides. I start from this area and then go down. So the next one is the whole buying behavior and the audiences. What do you sell and who do you sell it to, right? What do they buy? So you have a relevant portfolio of products. That includes your products, it includes your services, it includes partner products, it includes partner services to create what the person actually buys. That is called a solution. What is a solution? It's whatever people buy. People buy solutions, right? So it depends on what you need. So don't get bogged down with what is a product, what is a solution. A solution is something that is self-contained that some people say, oh, I need that. So if I go buy a nail, yes, indeed, that is the solution for what I need because I need a nail, right? I don't need somebody to put up the picture for me in the house. I'm going to do that. I need, right? So think about that. On the customer side, you have personas. Think about the personas because they each have different hot buttons. If you're talking to a CFO, they're not going to care too much about cash coherency algorithm. If you're talking to the technical guy, they probably aren't going to worry about how you finance it and your lease payments. So those really inform how you do. And then of course these can go directly and sell, and they can come in after you sell. After you sell the product, you can say I'm going to bring my partners to create a solution on site, or you may go afterwards and do that. So this is very important to really understand. What is competitive positioning? Competitive positioning, you have to do it within a target segment. It starts with differentiation. Obviously, differentiation comes from the word different. In what way are you different? Are you different? Is your differentiation valid? Is it real? So differentiation has to be also 2 or 3 things. It needs to be indisputable. It needs to be easy to understand, and it needs to be hard to copy. Right? Indisputable, easy to understand, hard to copy. The mental image of me is...
Sorry to interrupt, but also it has to matter, right? It can't just
well,
be
of
like
course.
it's blue and that one's green.
Yeah, the assumption is yes,
Right.
by the time you're here, we have to be relevant, which is sort of the target segment. But right on. So let's add the 4th one. Relevant, easy to understand, hard to copy, and so this is the relevance part of it. It needs to be differentiated. So, and the relevance has to do with the audience. And then you look at the competitor weaknesses, and then you come up with the value that represents that. So the value driver matrix, now that you've done all of that, you're prepared to do a value driver matrix. The value driver matrix is kind of what I call FDP. It starts with feature, benefit, pain point, buying behavior. So the feature could be limited slip differential in my engine. So what? Well, so what? It lets you travel in comfort and safety. So what? Well, are you planning to go skiing this winter? These roads are really pretty scary. Maybe you do want something like that. As you go from left to right, you become more relevant to the person who's trying to buy your stuff. And then if you understand their buying behavior and the experience that they expect, now you've got it. So what do you do if this was your thing? You'd come up with 4-wheel drive. My value is that I've got a 4-wheel drive technology. And the nice thing about 4-wheel drive is that it is easy to connect to the feature, limited slip differential, and intuitively obvious for the benefit. Oh, 4-wheel drive, okay, that means all 4 wheels are driving, right? Now, of course, you do that in the beginning until 20 years later where everybody's got 4-wheel drive. So then you start branding it. And you say, well, we actually have 4Motion, or ours is called Quattro. It's X-Drive. Oh, X-Drive, what the hell is X-Drive?
It is the best.
It is why? Well, because it's got dynamic variable things. So now you can actually sort of start branding it, and then after 3 years, nobody even asks and say, oh, X-Drive is a good thing, right? So this is important in terms of the value driver. But once you have that, you've got a lot of data now. Now you have a lot of insight on how you're going to synthesize things. So now we get into messages. This comes from Ted Levitt, who is the marketing guru at Harvard Business Review. People don't buy drill bits because they want drill bits. They buy them because they want holes. So this goes right to the core of feature benefit pain. And the key, as I was saying in the last slide, is to ask so what repeatedly. So what? So what? In fact, the test in my mind of having asked it enough times is if the group who you're doing this with starts getting angry. This is when the real answer comes up. Well, it's because of this. You should have said that from the beginning. Right? To pressure people, so what? So what? So what? And if you ask it like really a dozen times, now the other thing that it does for you is that now your slides are double clickable many times. If you're presenting and somebody says, well, can you say more about that bullet? You've already so whatted that 3-4 times. And you can say, glad you asked. Boom, 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 and say, oh my God, these guys are good, right? So it really has a lot of benefits. And of course, the arrow needs a tip. You want to lead with one message. Leading with one message is very difficult because you know all the good things that your product does. How can you just do one? And really, the only way to really do one is to abstract it into something that now becomes kind of amorphous. So it loses its teeth. It's not sharp anymore. So you got to pick one message and trust that your audience will figure out or ask you about other messages. All the wood behind the arrow, and the arrow has a tip. Pick one. Now, if you've done some data, if you've talked and validated, you kind of figure out what that is. Is your software keeping them online? Or is your software reduces cost? Or so figure that out and have a single message that does it. Focus, 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 right? And focus is always about what you're not going to do. Now, what are the message killers? You saw from Rich's presentation, they're descriptive instead of being persuasive, right? They use a lot of industry jargon. There's a lot of hype, no evidence. Hype is okay if you match it with evidence. Even better if you put the evidence first and then you hype it. And it's too long or too many stats. So people just stop reading, right? And if you're running out of breath reading your own sentence, it's too long. Speak in English. Do it like you're presenting to someone who's really not familiar with the technology. And in fact, most journalists can't, even though they're very good. They just can't know everything when they've got deadline and they need to crank out 12 articles. And then these are the tests, whether your value proposition and whether your messages are good. We've kind of made up these initials so that they kind of spell something cool. But for value proposition, we thought, your value has to be true. We can argue with that. It's targeted, it's relevant, it's unique, and it's evidenced. So it's a little contorted, but it comes up with the E. And then the messages have to be compelling, concise, customized, which is the weak one, and credible. So the 4 C's and true kind of make it easy for you to remember that, am I passing the test? So after you're done, go back and do a sanity check. Now, usually what we do after this is we do a one-liner exercise. Because like, Blake was saying earlier too, you need an elevator pitch. So this is a good exercise to do. My colleague does this, and it's always a hit. So start out by describing what you do in 16 words. No more, no less. 16 words. Give yourself 10 minutes to do that. See what you do. You come up with 3-4 different variations. Probably none of them really quite satisfy you. Get that right, 16 words. Then do it in 8 words. Then do it in 4 words. By then you kind of see the pattern. And by then you kind of figure out what really is valuable for you. Right? So we used to call it crudely lifeboat exercise. Who do you throw off the boat? And then I'm going to tee it up for the next talk, which is sort of the engagement and the demand generation and sort of putting all of this now into actual practice, which is what Kim and her team do. So we come up with a marketing roadmap, a calendar model that sort of looks something like this. So when I'm engaged with someone, this is what I do. I have corporate milestones, product milestones, roadmap, industry events, and the marketing roadmap. So that kind of gives me a skeleton of what's really going on, and you can build campaigns and you can build activities on it. So partnerships, financial results, appointments, customers, these are the things that are really corporate milestones. The product roadmap, when are you going to launch a new product? You have a beta, you've got a benchmark that you can brag about. industry events, trade shows, conferences, oh, SC15 is coming, what are we gonna do for SC15, right? So if you plan that in advance, you can build and choreograph a whole bunch of activity back to the marketing mix that really does that. And then, we have campaigns, go to market, geographies, solutions, etc. So I pause here and get ready for the next talk. Any questions for me? You guys like this marketing stuff? Unfortunately, it's important. You know?
I'm going to follow up the question I had to Rich, which was the bullet on hype. And so in the spirit of press releases, we've all been reading HPC Wire, insideHPC for years. And, pick your industry. We've read an infinite series of just ridiculous promises. And as technologists, of course, that hurts. But nonetheless, in order to play the game, we have to play the game. And I know the answer is just get over yourself and do it. But, at what point do you just say, you push that to somebody that really has an appetite?
So I have something for you. There's a reason they are called the media. They're a medium to reach your real audience, right? So they're a channel for your content to who you really are trying to reach. So you got to play whatever game they need to play for you to kind of go through that, right? But you're communicating with your audience. You're not communicating with the media. So your content has to be to the audience. And if you know your audience, you know their appetite for hype, you know their appetite for reality, you know their buying behavior, and then you can be confident in that. Because the people who are not your audience don't matter, right? So this is a very big problem in companies because everybody in the company wants to be satisfied with the communication. Not everybody in the company is a targeted audience for your communication. They don't need to be satisfied as long as they kind of get at who it is who's supposed to be satisfied. So when you see bad marketing, most times it's just bad. Why is it bad? Because it was hastily put together. It was probably put together by people who haven't done it before. Marketing is one of those things where everybody thinks they can do it, and many people actually can, but it takes time. And if you do it for a while, you sort of kind of get the hang of it. It's like anything else. So it's kind of, at this point, it's a giant technology industry by itself now. The Gartner Forresters of the world think CMOs are going to spend more money in the next 5 years than CIOs do. Whatever, right?
Because we have all that big data.
Well, we do. Please.
So I would extend your definition of marketing, and I would say that the technologist is the marketer, in the sense of, if you think about Peter Drucker, like the man of management, he basically believed that the technologists themselves had to learn how to market because the product should speak for itself. It should be able to sell itself. And so don't let the Madison Avenue folks delude you into thinking that you can't do this. You can, and you should be part of it.
Right. But you also have to be self-aware.
Yes.
Not everybody is Don Draper.
No.
For those of you who've watched Mad Men, right? And at least in the movie, he's just good. Do I really want him to work on my stuff? Sure I do.
Yeah.
Do you want Steven Spielberg to direct your movie? Yeah, right? Michael Jordan play on your team? Sure. So, part of course, being entrepreneurial is to understand what you really are good at and who you surround yourself who's really good at other things. So, okay.
Thank you, Shahin.